Hey everyone, this is Jorge. And in this video, I want to give you an overview of what I went through to get my thyroid under control, and just to give you an idea of how much information I need to put out there, and hopefully it helps you. However, I want to build a foundation. Okay, I want to give you something that you can take home today and start researching, start expanding, start applying it, so that you can start to get some of the results that I got. So I'll start with the 2 magic bullets just because it's the beginning of the video and I want everyone to get this. 2 things that I did that I can attribute my success in getting my thyroid under control was, number 1 was to restructure my gut flora meaning all the bacteria in the body, and then number 2 is hydrating the body. Okay, so those are the 2 things: restructure your gut flora and hydrate the body. Okay, so the reason why I want to start out with that is because your diet, everything that you eat, everything that you put on your skin, everything that is around you is going to affect your gut flora, what's inside of you. And if you don't know this, your health depends heavily on the bacteria inside of your body. As a matter of fact, you have bacteria inside of your body. The amount of bacteria in your body is so big, it outnumbers your body cells by 10 to 1. And so I want to give you that as something to get started to research on, because everything that I'm going to talk about in my next few videos and everything else that I'm going to be sharing and putting out there is going to revolve around this topic of restructuring your gut flora and understanding that bacteria in our bodies is like 80% of our health, and that bacteria outnumbers our own body cells by 10 to 1. Second thing is, our bodies are about 70% water, and the idea of hydrating the body, most people have the wrong idea. Hydrating the body is not a matter of drinking more water. There's a lot more to it than that. And so I want you to keep that in mind, because I'm not asking you to drink more water, I'm asking you to hydrate the body. Most people do not know how to hydrate the body, and there's a lot of things that you have to do if your body is already dehydrated. And so those are the things that I'm going to talk about. There are some things that I can tell you like right away that will help you out, and I'm going to do that over the course of however many videos, and you're going to see why. This is why I want to give you an overview. Second thing is, for those of you who don't know who I am, I struggled with hypothyroidism myself about 2 years ago. Right now I'm like 165 pounds. About 2 years ago I was over 200 pounds, and I had all the symptoms. I was gaining weight out of control. Nothing I ate was sitting well with me. I was allergic to just about anything I put in my body. Even my seasonal allergies went through the roof. My skin was dry. It was scaly every morning. I looked like I had psoriasis or something. My hair was just like falling off my head, like literally, like if I'd be lathering on my hair, like I had hair all over my hands and all over the tub. I had heavy eye bags, puffy eyes. And then my thinking was just not clear. Like I had this like brain fog that was so bad that I actually had to quit working. And so when I went through all of this and I got better, I decided that I wanted to help people. And I thought about doing all of this and putting a program together and becoming like some sort of like health coach and charging for this. But I remember what it was like. 2 years ago, when like even my even I had mood swings. I was just kind of irritated like all the time. Just it was just bad. And when I remember what I was going through, I decided, what, screw it. I'm just gonna do this for free. And so I want to put that out there, because this is not a something that I'm charging for. I'm doing this on my spare time. I do run another business, so if you ever contact me and I don't get back to you, please understand that I'm doing this on my spare time and that I'm pretty occupied with other things. But I will do my best to get back to you, as soon as I can. you know, if I do have the time. And I do get a lot of people contacting me all the time. So, you know, if I don't get back to you the first time, you know, try again, or you know, do something. But you know, this is why I'm doing all these videos, so that you have all the information that you need. Second thing, part of what I want to do today is kind of give you, you know, an overview of, you know, what are some of my sources, you know, how did I go about finding out all this information, and how did I go about getting better. And I got to tell you that after 20 months of researching, meeting people with hypothyroidism, there's a couple things that I can tell you. One is that not everyone that has hypothyroidism got there the same way. The root cause is not the same. And so the reason why I want to emphasize this is because you're going to hear a lot of people talk about cures, you know, like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that, and, you know, add more iodine to your diet, or, you know, go gluten-free, or, you know, do this and that. And you have to understand that what may be good advice for one person may not necessarily be good advice for another person. And as a matter of fact, I personally shifted my focus from trying to find a cure or trying to get rid of symptoms to just concentrating on feeding the body and having the healthiest body possible. And there's a huge difference, because before I was doing things like, you know what, my hair's falling off. So I was like, okay, how do I prevent, you know, hair from shedding? Or, you know, I had a brain fog, and like, okay, how do I, you know, improve my thinking, my memory, and things like that. And so a lot of the advice that I was getting there was, you know, making me do things that were not good for me long term. And so when I switched my diet, when I began to actually nourish my body, hydrate the body, you know, increase restructure my gut flora, feeding it the minerals, the vitamins, and everything that the body needs, feeding the glands and everything, all of a sudden the symptoms just started to go away. And so what I can tell you was that the hardest thing about this was, it wasn't information. You have all the information available, and I'm hoping to structure the information even better, so that you don't have to spend 20 months like I did researching all of this and testing things on myself. I can tell that there's going to be two things that are going to work against you. Number one is your beliefs, and number two is your habits. Beliefs and habits. When I got started, you know, when I talked to my doctor, when I talked to an endocrinologist, I heard something that I'm actually kind of sad to hear, and especially from other people who are going through hypothyroidism. And I was told that this condition was a forever thing, that there was nothing that I could do about it. And I think that it was right then and there. I mean, I was disempowered at first. I was kind of depressed. I mean, I was already depressed before I heard that, but even more so when I heard that. But it was also at that moment that I decided that if there was going to be one thing that I was going to do, is I was going to figure this out, and I was going to do something about it. Okay? After I made that decision, everything just started to change. Now, what I went through, it was, I mean, for me to have that belief was so bad, was so hard. But I think even harder than that was to change my habits. And changing my habits was hard because I was very, very misinformed. And that is the biggest problem with everyone here. So I want to start out by, you know, giving you an overview of like how I came about all of this, and how what I started to do to change, you know, my eating habits and everything else. So number one thing is, you know, I mentioned earlier that, you know, my two magic bullets were restructure your gut flora and hydrate the body. So restructuring the gut flora, I'm a home brewer. I was brewing beer before I was doing all of this. You know, I was getting a beer belly, and I was blaming beer for my weight gain. You know, this was before I knew I had hypothyroidism. But there's something that clicked. You know, once I heard that the body is made up of bacteria and living body cells, and that bacteria outnumber you know, body cells by 10 to 1, and that 80% of your health is bacteria, something clicked in me. And just to give you an idea, I was reading a book on yeast, and this is not just yeast and beer fermentation, but it also talks about bacteria. Brewer's yeast, lactobacillus, which is a probiotic, good friendly bacteria, gut bacteria, body bacteria. It's the same thing. It's the same exact bacteria that we use in brewing beer as it is in our bodies, as it is in plants, as it is in just about any other living thing out there. And the idea that our bodies are essentially like huge fermentation tanks. I mean, you eat something, it is going to go through a process very similar to fermentation. It may go through fermentation if your body is plugged, if it's not clean, which most people, that's a problem. That's why they are, that's why they have all these intolerances, food intolerances and allergies. When I understood that, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, like I've been brewing beer for a number of years. I understand what makes yeast grow, what makes bacteria grow, and my health is essentially that. It's like, if I can grow good bacteria instead of bad bacteria, then I think I can do something. However, at the time, the idea of bacteria, like just the word bacteria alone, I had such a negative connotation, like it had such a negative connotation to me where I was scared. I mean, some of my foods that I started to eat, like if you read a book on like wild fermentation, this is live culture foods. The idea of making food with bacteria, like sourdough bread, yogurt, cheese, kimchi, sauerkraut, all these other things was downright scary because I just thought that bacteria was bad. Everything I heard, before I did any of this was antibacterial soap, antibacterial, powder, antibacterial this, that. And so the idea of putting bacteria in the body was just like, it was so like against me, so foreign, so bad. And this is when now I understand why most people just grow up to be sick and why there's so many diseases out there. And it's because we are afraid of bacteria, and bacteria is what keeps us healthy if you understand it and if you know what you're doing. And that's a problem that our food system, our education when it comes to health and nutrition doesn't even talk about this. And yet it's basically like 80% of what we should be doing. So that's kind of how I started. Now, the reason why I decided to take on this approach and start to teach about it is because I have a very unique perspective. And again, it's because I started to I have like over 15 books on like brewing beer, and there's a lot of things that I never actually thought that this would apply to health. But like, for example, like hops, hops are very estrogenic, and one of the problems with like people with hypothyroidism is that processing estrogen, for the body to detox itself of estrogen. Processing progesterone and all these other hormones and chemicals, it's a very hard. And when I started reading about it, all of a sudden, like all the things that I've learned here, like all of a sudden, like they started to apply it. It made sense. I'd heard about them. Hydrating the body. Most people think that hydrating is just a matter of drinking more water, when in reality, drinking like tap water or some of these other bottled waters that you buy, they actually dehydrate the body. And so for someone to understand water, it's very hard. We're not taught this at school. We're not taught this anywhere. Even most nutritionists I talk to, they don't understand water. And the only reason why I understand water and minerals, ionic minerals, electrolytes, and all these other things is because, again, I've been brewing beer. I've been dealing with water. I have a book on like water that talks a lot of like science behind water. A lot of it, which it's still like very, it's not very well understood. Yet our bodies are 70% water, and so hydrating the body is like, it's like our number one way of nutrition, and most people don't understand it. So I'm putting this out there because some of the things that I'm going to talk about go against a lot of things that we've learned before. And I'm telling you, before I did all of this, I was big into bodybuilding. I have a huge like encyclopedia book on like bodybuilding and following diets like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to, eating heavy protein diets and all these other things. I used to be into this kind of stuff. I used to be into food and like understanding food. This is a book on understanding food. I used to be into a lot of things. The same thing with like bodybuilding, understanding like how muscle is built in the body. And so a lot of these books, they have a lot of good information, but unless you understand how the body works, and most importantly, our food system is so screwed up. It's so bad. Unless you understand, what you're really eating, it's very hard to take the advice in these books seriously, because a lot of the information here is good if you understand ingredients. So for example, I was brewing wheat beers, and so like I have a book on like brewing wheat, and this talks a lot about aside from brewing practice, it talks a lot about wheat, how wheat is cultivated, and like different strains of wheat, where like the different properties of them. And so for example, you have a book on like wheat, and so in brewing beer, here's a book on froth foam. Foam is built by nitrogen. Okay, now the reason why that makes sense and how this applies to a thyroid is because, well, again, when you learn about building muscle, you understand that nitrogen is like the main component of building muscle. And so you start reading books like Wheat Belly, where you learn about gluten, which is a protein. There's differences in like all these other proteins, and again, the only reason why I understand some of these is because I've been dealing with a lot of it. But all of a sudden, everything starts making sense. Nitrogen is needed for muscle building. It's needed it's like the building block of everything. Plants need nitrogen to grow. If you look at fertilizers, they're NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Our bodies need nitrogen, right? And so it all of a sudden puts food, health, nutrition into a different perspective, and that's part of what I want to start teaching, and like as a way to not do exactly as I do, but to understand why I make the food choices that I do, why I did certain things that I did, and most importantly, so that I can give you like some sort of guidelines and parameters to follow to get better. So this being said, let me talk a little bit about what I had to go through, and hopefully you can start to take some of this and start applying it to get your thyroid under control. So number one thing is, I understood that if your body has bad bacteria, you're not going to be healthy. Now, some people are going to nitpick at everything that I say. I'm not saying to get rid of all bad bacteria, because your body does need a little bit of good bacteria. So if you're going to nitpick at anything that I say, I'm telling you right now, you're wasting your time, because I'm just trying to share information that you can take, apply, research. Okay, I'm not here as a guru teacher. I'm here as a fellow student, just because I went through this. So please just keep this on a positive note. If you find something that's wrong, don't tell me that it's just wrong. Tell me like why you think it's wrong, and give me the right answer. Don't just be out here trolling. Okay. Once understood that bad bacteria was like, well, it was the main cause of a lot of things that I was doing, I started to figure out, okay, so why did my body get bad bacteria to begin with? And so there's so many things, but just to give you an idea is, the body is, like I said, it's like a water tank, and you have filters in your body. So what I started to do was understand that when you eat food and it gets to your gut, that's where it ferments. Now, in brewing beer, I understood one thing. Brewing beer is like, I take water with sugar, and then I add yeast, and then the yeast eat the sugar, ferment it, turn into alcohol, beer, whatever. But the thing that I understood was that sugar was food for good bacteria as well as it was for bad bacteria. And so I had to take all sorts of precautions to make sure that it was the good bacteria that populated there first, and keep the bad bacteria from ever getting in there. And that's how I was getting good beers. If I allowed bad bacteria, then you get what's called an infected batch. So I used to go through I was very meticulous when it came to brewing beer, but I just never thought about my own body. And most people, they're not meticulous with their own body. They put in any kind of food that that tastes good. It looks healthy, they put it into the body, and they don't like look into it and figure out if that's going to be food that's going to feed bad bacteria, good bacteria, or that it may contain bad bacteria as opposed to good bacteria. And so, that's like one aspect of it. Second is, once you start eating like all these bad things, your body starts to get plugged. All of a sudden, your kidneys, they don't filter, they don't process, foods the same way because now they're plugged. They're like little filters and they're plugged. Your kidney, your liver, same thing. It starts to get plugged. And so now, a thyroid thing is like you release T4 and then T4 is converted into T3 in your liver. But if your liver is toxic, if it's not functioning properly, that conversion may not happen. Same thing with your gut. Your gut is like the sponge where your body absorbs a lot of the nutrients. But if you have bad bacteria in there, again, this is something that I learned through brewing beer. Whenever yeast bacteria eat food and digest it and ferment it, they create byproducts. That's where all your vitamins are created. That's where all the nutrients become what's called bioavailable. They become, like minerals get into like the ionic form mineral that the body's able to absorb. Everything happens in the gut. But if you have bad bacteria, well, the reason why a beer with bad bacteria tastes like crap is because the byproducts are not only toxic, but they just don't taste good. And so it's the same thing in the body. If you already have bad bacteria, all these byproducts that they're creating, that's what's causing, all these autoimmune diseases and all these allergic reactions and everything else. It's because you have the bad bacteria eating the food that you're putting into your body. So even if you're eating good food, if you have bad bacteria, you're still feeding the bad bacteria. And so one of the first things that I did was, once I understood that, once I got that idea, it's like, okay, I need to first clean my body. So I started doing what some people call detoxing, cleansing. I started to just clean out the body, and I did it mainly by juicing. I used oxy powder. I started to drink tons of fluids, tons of liquids, and just basically made sure that my body got clean. And so again, this is something that I went back and I'm like, wow, I remember everything that I had to do to keep my brewing equipment clean, yet we don't do anything to keep our bodies clean. We don't do anything to keep our kidneys clean, our liver clean, our colon clean. We just eat. We don't care. We don't know. No one teaches us this. And so I started doing a lot of these things. I started cleaning out my body. So when people ask me, why do I drink raw apple cider vinegar in the morning? It's like, well, that's because that's what helps me keep my kidneys clean. It's what helped me get rid of my eye bags, because your face is like a dashboard on your car. If you start getting like heavy eye bags and like all these other things, that's like your body knows like, hey, you know what, your kidneys are not right. Like these lines that develop here, it's like your adrenal glands are not right. Your liver's not right. If your nose starts getting big, that's like, you're developing fat in your heart and like all these other things. If you start getting these smile lines, if they start getting like really, really pronounced, your body sounds like, hey, your colon is like not doing well. Especially if they start going underneath your lips, it's like even worse. And so once I started to like learn about this, I started to do these kinds of things. I started to clean out my body, and then I began to understand, what real nutrition is, and understand that we are more liquiditarians than anything else. Like, this is something that you have no idea. This is what, again, belief and habits are going to keep you from getting better. For me to go from thinking of when I used to eat tacos and burgers and pizza, that was to me, that was food. All right, if I could chew it up and taste good, that was food. And then when I started to learn about the body and what really feeds the body, it's really more liquids that feed it. That was such a foreign concept. I couldn't wrap my head around it, and it took such a long time for me to understand that. But when I did, I started to include more fluids, more drinks into my diet, things like kombucha, things like coconut water, apple cider vinegar. I started making these like blue-green algae, water mixes, a lot of teas like hibiscus tea, yerba mate. I started drinking a lot of dandelion root tea and all these other things. And everything that I was doing was basically to feed my body with minerals. And the reason for it is because, again, from brewing beer, understanding things like, what grows a plant like hops, fermenting foods and all these other things, and understanding the body, it's like everything revolves around 5 things. It's water, minerals, temperature, pH, and then the enzymes which are released by yeast and bacteria. And so when you look at those 5 things, I mean, everything else makes sense. You look at something like wheat. Why is wheat so bad? Modern day wheat. There's a big difference between modern day wheat and einkorn. Einkorn is the original wheat. Now, why is einkorn good? Even though it still has gluten, why is modern day wheat, why is the gluten in modern day wheat so bad? And this is where you start looking at like, crossbreeding, hybridizing plants, whether they're genetically modified or not, it doesn't matter. The point is that if you grow wheat outside of its original land, which is, Turkey or East Africa, the reason why it's bad is because it doesn't get the same nutrients that it does over there. It doesn't get the same amount of water, minerals. The soil doesn't have the same pH, same temperature. And even if you can mimic all those, what most people can't mimic is the bacteria in the air, the bacteria in the environment, the bacteria in the soil. All right, and that goes the same way for all other foods. Potato, same thing. And potato is not like the original potato is the Peruvian papa, and it's papa, P-A-P-A. When it was brought over to Spain, again, they couldn't grow it because the soil didn't have the same amount of water, minerals, pH, temperature, and or bacteria. And so they had to crossbreed it, and they chose to crossbreed it with the batata, which is basically the sweet yam. And so B-A-T-A-T-A, batata, and the papa became patata. That's the name in Spanish, and that's where the name potato comes from, right? And so again, it's a hybridized thing, and the reason why it's not the same as the Peruvian papa is because where it's being grown, it doesn't have the same amount of water, minerals, pH, temperature, and or bacteria, but they are able to grow it because they use fertilizers that have NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, which are the only things that you need to grow something. Again, these are things that you can learn about if you study bodybuilding. Look at bodybuilders. They take all these nitrogen, protein supplements, which all sorts of proteins are basically nitrogen. I mean, nitrogen is the building block of amino acids. And so you start to learn about all these things, and all of a sudden things start making sense. Things start making sense because when you create a wheat that is resistant to bacteria out in the field, what that means is that bacteria can't eat the wheat because it has proteins that are too strong to be digested, aka modern day gluten. Well, when you put them into the body, what eats bacteria out in the field, and what eats proteins or plants out in the field, and what eats food, which these plants in our bodies are the same bacteria. If they can't eat them in the field, guess what? They're not going to be able to eat them inside of our bodies, which is why we have undigested proteins in the bodies, which is what causes all the allergic reactions. Again, all of this, like it starts to make sense once you start to connect the dots. And that's basically what I started to do about 20 months ago. A lot of people are like, well, isn't beer bad for you and stuff like that? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, if you look at beer as most people do, which is just what's sold in the stores, that is for the most part bad for you, because alcohol is bad for our livers. Especially if you have hypothyroidism, you want to stay away from it. As far as beers, most of them are made with hops, and hops are highly estrogenic, and we don't want to add estrogen to our bodies. But then again, sacred herbal healing beers, there's a lot of fermented beverages that have a lot of healing properties. And again, I stayed away from like finding cures and finding out what makes the body healthy. And so things like kombucha. Kombucha is a fermented beverage. Some stores actually have to label them as containing alcohol because they do have a little bit of alcohol. Some of them actually don't allow you to buy it unless you're 21. But the amount of alcohol is very minimal. And what's important about those beverages is not that they have alcohol, but what they do to the body is that they clean the body. They clean the filters of the body, whether it's the kidneys, the liver, and all these other things, which is what you want to keep clean in order to allow for flow in your body, which is really what you're trying to get. You got to get your body into a flow because it's like, again, it's water, and so just like any other body of water, if it doesn't move, it becomes stagnant water. It gets raunchy and it gets like stinky and all these other things. And that's what's happening, in a lot of us. It's like we're not eating the right foods. We're not drinking enough minerals and electrolytes, and we believe that drinking tap water is what's going to hydrate us, and that's just not the case. So this is one of the longest videos that I've made on this, and again, the only reason why I made it this long is because I wanted to give you an overview and how and just basically build a foundation. So if you made it this long, first of all, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and just understand that there's so much information, but really focus on restructuring gut flora and hydrating the body. And I'm going to share with you, what are some of the things that I did to do that. And other than that, your idea of healthy eating, trust me, if you get one thing out of this video, is this: do not stop looking for healthy foods until your symptoms get better. If you still have symptoms, you have not found the right foods. Your diet is what's going to get rid of all your symptoms. And I'm going to share with you pretty much everything that I've ever tried and everything that I've done. And, hopefully it will all make sense. Last thing, it's not just about what foods we eat. The source of the foods has a lot to do with it. Not just the source of foods, but also how you prepare the foods, and not just how you prepare the foods, but also how you eat the foods. So, quick example, digesting food, you don't digest carbohydrates and proteins the same way. If you look, for example, like sacred herbal healing beers, there's a tribe in South America that make chicha beer. And chicha beer is brewed with corn, which you don't have the same enzymes that barley or wheat does. And so what they do is they put it in their mouth and allow digestive enzymes in their saliva to process the starch, convert into sugar, and then they ferment that. So they understand how to use their body to digest food, and most people, most of us don't, because we just chew up food and just gulp it down and let the stomach take care of the rest, which is what I used to believe was how our body worked. Same thing. Our stomachs are supposed to digest proteins, but when you have hypothyroidism, if your stomach is very likely not to, it's very likely to not produce enough stomach acid, so digesting protein becomes hard, which is why, in a lot of cases, like I used to have, I was borderline IBS, with irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut, and all these other things, is because we're not digesting protein the same way. Our glands are not working properly, whether it's our adrenal glands, pituitary, or thyroid gland, and yet we don't even know how to feed them, right? A lot of people just like intake something, but they never think about rubbing, for example, coconut oil over their glands, because that feeds them just as well, or allowing the coconut oil to be absorbed underneath your tongue, like sublingual. Yet we do it for other things. Like I know even some people like take pills that way, and that's because if you think about it, if you gulp it down, it goes down to the stomach. In order for that nutrient to go from the stomach back up to the glands, that's quite a distance. Not to mention like all the things that it goes through, it's just not going to be the same. But if you let it absorb right there, that's like a direct way to feed the glands. And so a lot of people don't understand these things, something that I had to learn. And so these are some of the things that I'm going to be sharing and hopefully passing on to you, because again, I've been through this, and so I want to help you guys out. And so that being said, I hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure that you leave me a comment below. Let me know what you like most about this video. Maybe what are some of the things that you want to talk about. Don't ask me for medical advice, because I'm not going to give out any. Like this video if you found it helpful, and be sure to share it with your friends or anyone else you know who may be struggling with hypothyroidism. And I hope to see you around in my next few videos. All right, I will talk to you later. Bye.